The first thing I noticed when I got home that Friday wasn't the smell. It was the silence. No low hum of the fridge. No buzz from the deep freezer in the garage. Just dead quiet. I'm Xander McCoy, a 42-year-old ER nurse who works 12-hour shifts and barely has time to sleep, let alone babysit a bunch of overzealous board members with control issues. But unfortunately for me, I live under the tight grip of the West Elm Ridge HOA, led by none other than Zelda Tinsworth, a bleach blonde tyrant whose idea of community service is micromanaging the shade of your porch light. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and gagged. The stench hit me like a truck. Everything was warm. The milk was curdled, the meat was slimy, the eggs were sweating. The freezer? Melted. Everything ruined. I slammed the door shut and immediately checked the wall outlet. Unplugged. I froze. I never unplug appliances. Ever. Especially not the fridge. That's when I saw Zelda's little calling card. A note taped directly to the outlet, written in perfect passive-aggressive cursive. Saving energy helps the whole community. Xander. You left your garage door open for hours last week, so I came by to check. Figured I'd help you by unplugging a few things. You're welcome. Zelda Tinsworth, HOA president. I couldn't believe it. She had the audacity to enter my locked home, unplug my refrigerator, and act like she did me a favor? I stormed outside and spotted her 2 houses down, watering her flower beds like she didn't just commit a felony. Zelda, I shouted, marching down the sidewalk. What the hell is wrong with you? She turned, holding a watering can like it was a scepter. Oh, Xander, you're welcome. I stopped by to do a quick energy audit. You wouldn't believe how much power your appliances were draining. You broke into my house. I used the spare key from the lockbox. HOA emergency access. Section 4B. That's for actual emergencies, not your eco-crusade. I consider excessive energy waste an emergency. Her voice was clipped, smug, and self-righteous. You left your garage open. Anyone could have walked in. I just happened to notice while on my morning neighborhood sweep. I clenched my jaw. You unplugged my fridge. I work long shifts. I had over $300 worth of food in there. Then maybe you should be more careful with your doors, she snapped. I did what I had to do for the good of the neighborhood. I stared at her, stunned. You don't get to decide what's good for me. Well, the HOA does. And I am the HOA. She smiled like she'd just won a prize. That's when I walked away. Not because I was done, but because I wasn't. I headed straight into my house, grabbed my phone, and started taking photos of every spoiled item. The fridge, the freezer, the note, the unplugged cord. Zelda Tinsworth had just made a massive mistake, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table under the flickering overhead bulb with a yellow legal pad, writing down every detail I could remember. Time I left for work. Time I got home. What I found. What she said. I wanted everything documented while it was still fresh. This wasn't just about the food. It was about the principle and the law. At dawn, I took a trip to the grocery store's customer service counter and got a printed list of my last purchases. I highlighted everything perishable: milk, eggs, meat, frozen goods, and added the prices next to them. Then I called my buddy Levi. Levi's a city housing inspector. We met a few years back when I treated him after a ladder fall. He owed me one, and he knew the local housing codes like the back of his hand. By noon, he was standing in front of my garage, holding a clipboard. She went inside your house? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Used the spare key in the HOA lockbox. Said it was emergency access. He let out a whistle. That's not what those are for. She's not a first responder or city official. That key's only to be used if law enforcement or fire personnel need to get in. Not for a self-appointed energy cop. I figured. Levi took photos of the lockbox, then had me unlock it. He snapped more photos of the key inside. There's going to be paperwork, he said, tucking the clipboard under his arm. But this violates municipal code. Unauthorized entry. Misuse of emergency access. And if she left a note admitting she unplugged the fridge, that's tampering with private property too. I handed him the note. He read it once, then asked to take it as evidence. Can you get me a copy of your work schedule? He asked. Already printed. I gave it to him. This is going to be fun, he said. The next step was the police. I didn't call the non-emergency line. I walked right into the precinct with everything Levi had documented and asked to file a report for unlawful entry and property damage. The desk officer looked skeptical until I showed him the note. His expression changed immediately. She admitted this in writing? Clear as day. He took my statement. I gave him copies of everything: work schedule, grocery receipts, photos. By the time I walked out, they had already dispatched an officer to interview Zelda. But I wasn't done. That evening, I knocked on my neighbor Jordan's door. He's a retired school principal, the kind of guy who keeps receipts going back 20 years. More importantly, he had security cameras facing the street. I asked if he had footage from the day before. He led me to his living room, pulled up the DVR system, and rewound to the time I left for my shift. We watched together as Zelda strutted up my driveway at 10:42 in the morning, typed into the lockbox, and walked straight into my house. 5 minutes later, she came out, looking pleased with herself. I copied the footage onto a thumb drive. Evidence just kept piling up. By the following Monday, word had spread. It started with a flyer. Someone I still don't know who posted copies of Zelda's note on every community bulletin board in the neighborhood. Then came the group chat messages. Apparently, this wasn't her first time using the HOA lockbox to check on homes. One resident, Dina, said she once came home from vacation to find all her blinds closed. Zelda had adjusted them because she thought it was too easy to see inside. Another neighbor, Mark, said his sprinkler system had been turned off without warning. She decided it was wasting water. By Wednesday, a special meeting was called. Not by Zelda, by the residents. It was held at the community clubhouse. I got there early, sat in the back, and watched as the room filled. 50 people, then 60. Half the neighborhood turned out. Zelda walked in 10 minutes late, flanked by her loyal board members Doug, who never spoke unless Zelda nodded first, and Francine, who once fined a family for chalk drawings on their own driveway. She walked to the front like she owned the place. "All right, everyone," she began. "I know there's been some confusion about recent events, so let's clear the air, shall we?" A hand shot up, then another, then 5 more. She ignored them. I've always had this community's best interests at heart. Sometimes that means making difficult choices. But everything I've done has been within the guidelines. I stood up. "You broke into my house." The room went silent. She blinked. "Excuse me. You used an emergency key to enter my home without permission. You unplugged my fridge. You left a note admitting to it. That's not a guideline. That's criminal trespass. I was preventing energy waste. You are not an energy auditor. You're not a city official. You're not law enforcement. You're a neighbor with a superiority complex." Gasps rippled through the room. "I filed a police report," I said. "They're investigating. I have evidence. Security footage. The note. Eyewitness statements. You're going to be held accountable." Zelda's face drained of color. "I think it's time we vote on removing her from the board," said Dina, stepping forward. "You can't," Zelda started. "We can," said Jordan. "According to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws, if 2/3 of attending residents vote for it, the president can be removed at a special meeting." A cheer rose from the back. Someone passed out printed ballots. The vote took 10 minutes. 72 ballots were cast. 69 voted yes. Zelda stood there, frozen, lips parted like she couldn't quite believe what just happened. "You're no longer president," Jordan said. "Effective immediately." "I'll contest this," she snapped. "You're free to," he said. "But until then, leave the emergency keys where they belong." She stormed out. The following week, I got a call from the precinct. The district attorney's office was reviewing the case. Tampering with private property, unlawful entry, and misuse of a designated emergency resource were all on the table. Meanwhile, the HOA board was restructured. Jordan was voted in as interim president. The first motion? Change the lockbox codes and require all emergency access to be recorded in a public logbook with 2 witnesses present. I submitted a small claims case against Zelda for the cost of the spoiled groceries. I included every receipt, every photo, and an affidavit from Levi. The case never even made it to court. Her lawyer called me to settle within a week. She paid the full amount plus court fees. I bought a brand new fridge with the check, and this time I installed my own lock on it. Just in case Zelda ever got any more bright ideas. 2 mornings after Zelda was voted out, I opened my front door to find a manila envelope sitting on my porch. No note. No delivery label. Just my name written in heavy black ink across the front. Inside was a cease and desist letter. From Zelda's attorney. It claimed I was maliciously defaming her character, instigating mob behavior, and creating a hostile living environment through false accusations and neighborhood gossip. It warned that if I didn't refrain from further inflammatory actions and publicly retract any statements made, she would pursue legal action. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. The woman had entered my home without permission, left a written confession, and was now trying to play victim? I wasn't intimidated, but I was curious. Why would she go through the trouble and expense of hiring legal counsel after being removed from a volunteer community board? I called Levi again. Can you run a check on her for me? I asked. Public permits, past code violations, anything strange? He didn't ask why. Just said, give me a day. While I waited, I paid a visit to the new HOA board. Jordan had set up temporary office hours at the clubhouse to improve transparency. I found him sitting with a large binder open on the table, HOA records from the last 5 years. Something bothering you? He asked, tilting his glasses down. I slipped the letter onto the table. He read it, expression tightening. She's bluffing. But this is unusual. She's never gone this far. She's hiding something. He nodded slowly. I've been digging through the HOA's annual expenditures. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't line up. Payments to third-party consultants we never authorized. Landscaping costs that tripled last year with no explanation. And I found a maintenance invoice billed to your address for ductwork cleaning. I never scheduled that. Exactly. I asked if I could get copies. He handed me a USB drive. Take it. I've already backed everything up. The next day, Levi called me back. She owns 3 rental properties in the neighborhood, he said. 2 under her name, 1 under an LLC registered in Nevada. That one's been consistently late on utility payments, but the HOA covered the fines. Not sure how she pulled that off. Could she have used HOA funds to cover personal property expenses? If she had access to the accounts, yeah. But she'd have to forge board approval. Can I prove that? Not easily. But if she tried to pass those expenses off as common maintenance, you might. I spent the next 2 nights combing through the financial records Jordan gave me. I compared every maintenance charge with resident complaints, contractor receipts, and public service orders. I found 6 charges labeled Emergency HVAC Service billed to community funds. 5 of those addresses matched Zelda's properties. None of the homeowners had ever requested service. It was enough. I forwarded everything to the city auditor's office, then called the detective assigned to my original case. I told him I believed Zelda hadn't just entered my house illegally, she might have been siphoning money from the HOA for years under false pretenses. He listened carefully. We'll look into it, he said. But if she's been misappropriating funds, that's a separate investigation. You mind if we pass this along to economic crimes? Please do. A week later, I got a call from a detective named Harris. He worked white-collar crimes and had a reputation for being quietly relentless. He asked me to come in. His office was cramped, paper-stuffed, and smelled like stale coffee. He waved me into the chair across from his desk. We got your files, he said. You're thorough. I'm a nurse, I said. Details keep people alive. He nodded. We pulled HOA bank records. Some of the payments she authorized don't have any corresponding invoices. Others list contractors who don't exist. Shell companies? Possibly. We're subpoenaing financials from the vendors now. In the meantime, we'd like you to stay available if this goes to grand jury. That was when it sank in. This wasn't just about my fridge anymore. Zelda had turned the HOA into her personal piggy bank. She wasn't just nosy, she was running a miniature crime ring under the guise of community improvement. The next month was a blur of depositions, emails from city attorneys, and whispered conversations between neighbors. Then came the search warrant. Just after sunrise one Thursday, a convoy of unmarked cars pulled up outside Zelda's house. I stood on my porch with a cup of tea, watching officers carry out boxes of documents, a desktop computer, and what looked like a safe. The neighborhood group chat exploded. By evening, we learned she'd been taken into custody for questioning. No official charges yet, but rumors swirled. Someone from the HOA board leaked that detectives had found over $15,000 in unaccounted funds, plus evidence she'd used HOA money to pay off personal debts. Jordan called me that night. She's trying to cut a deal, he said, offering to resign from the neighborhood entirely if they drop the charges. Think they'll take it? Not likely. Economic crimes doesn't like being lied to. A week later, charges were filed. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, unlawful access to private property. and obstruction for altering dates on financial statements before handing them over. Zelda retained a new attorney. Her original one dropped her after the search warrant hit. The trial was scheduled for the following spring. In the meantime, the HOA underwent a massive overhaul. Jordan implemented open books policies, mandatory resident oversight on all expenditures, and removed the emergency lockbox system entirely. Each homeowner was advised to change their locks. Several did. I installed a full security system. At the next community meeting, Jordan made a public announcement. "Thanks to Xander's efforts," he said, "we've recovered over $9,000 in misused funds, and we're filing for restitution. We're also restructuring the bylaws to prevent any one person from exerting unchecked authority again." Someone in the back started clapping. Then another. Soon the entire room was on its feet. Afterward, a neighbor I barely knew approached me. An older woman with a cane and silver hair pulled into a tight bun. "You saved this place," she said quietly. People were afraid of her. We didn't realize how deep it went. I didn't know how to respond. So I just nodded. In the weeks that followed, Zelda's house went on the market. The listing sat for a while. Word had gotten around. Eventually, a young couple bought it and replaced the manicured hedges with wildflowers. The neighborhood felt different, lighter. I went back to work, still pulling 12-hour shifts, still coming home exhausted. But now, when I opened my fridge, I didn't think of spoiled food or passive-aggressive notes. I thought of what it meant to protect your home even from the people who claimed to be doing the same. And I was just getting started. The trial began on a cloudless Tuesday morning, the courthouse steps flanked by reporters and curious locals who had followed every twist of the saga since the HOA scandal first broke. I arrived early, not because I had to testify that day, but because I wanted to see her walk in Zelda Tinsworth, once queen of cul-de-sacs, now escorted by her third attorney in as many months. She didn't make eye contact with anyone. Her usual pastel blazer and oversized sun had been replaced by a charcoal pantsuit that looked 2 sizes too tight, her hair tied back so severely it looked like it hurt. Her expression was flat, drained of the performative warmth she used to weaponize against neighbors. She sat down at the defense table with a rigid posture that screamed denial. I'd been called as a key witness by the prosecution. They weren't just trying her for the initial break, and they'd expanded the charges based on the HOA discovery audit, which had uncovered a pattern of fraudulent invoices, unauthorized use of HOA funds, manipulation of meeting minutes, and falsified maintenance reports on properties she partially owned. The courtroom was packed. Several neighbors were there, including Jordan, who had taken time off to testify about the forged authorizations she'd submitted under his name during her last year as president. The first day focused on laying out the financial crimes. Detective Harris took the stand and explained how his team traced a series of payments from the HOA account to a shell company called Ridgeview Eco Consulting. The account had been opened a year earlier, registered to a P.O. box in another county. Cross-checking IP addresses from the vendor's submission portal revealed that the login credentials used to submit invoices came from Zelda's personal laptop. Her attorney tried to argue that she had hired a third-party contractor who had gone rogue, that she had no idea the company wasn't legitimate. The prosecutor, a woman named Marisol Chang with a voice like cold steel, didn't give an inch. She presented emails between Zelda and the supposed contractor, emails that were all written from the same IP address as Zelda's home internet. One sent by the vendor, the other received by her minutes later. She pointed out identical grammatical errors, identical formatting. The jury took notes furiously. By the third day, they brought me in. I was sworn in and took the stand, feeling oddly calm. This wasn't like the ER. No adrenaline, no alarms, just facts. Marisol held up a printout of the note Zelda had left on my refrigerator outlet. "Mr. McCoy, do you recognize this?" "I do. Can you explain what this document is?" "It's a note left by the defendant after entering my home without permission, using an HOA emergency key. She unplugged my refrigerator, causing all of its contents to spoil." "Did you give her permission to enter?" "No. Did you ever authorize her, or the HOA, to conduct what she referred to as an energy audit on your property?" "No, I did not." The defense tried to poke holes in my testimony. "Mr. McCoy, isn't it possible that your garage door was left open and the defendant entered out of concern for your safety?" "My front door was locked. She used the emergency lockbox key. That's not concern. That's trespassing." The judge overruled their objection. Marisol then presented the surveillance footage from Jordan's security system. The timestamp clearly showed Zelda unlocking my door, entering for precisely 4 minutes, then exiting with the note in hand. She rested her case that afternoon. The defense made a last-ditch attempt to portray Zelda as overwhelmed, trying her best to juggle volunteer responsibilities with community expectations. They brought in Francine, the former board member, who claimed they had all agreed on proactive home interventions. But when asked to produce any documentation, she couldn't. Every supposed consent form was conveniently missing. By Friday, the jury had heard everything. The financial fraud, the break-in, the misuse of emergency access, the forged invoices. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. Zelda didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just stared at the floor as the judge read the verdict. The restitution order came next. Over $18,000 to be repaid to the HOA, plus an additional $2,000 to me for damages and legal costs. But the real blow came in the sentencing. 18 months in county custody, followed by 3 years probation, during which she would be barred from participating in any HOA, board, or neighborhood committee. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order barring her from contacting me or stepping foot on my property. When it was over, I stepped outside into the sunlight. The courthouse steps were quieter now, the reporters gone, the crowd dissipating. Jordan caught up with me at the bottom of the steps. "You're going to have to find a new hobby," he said. "I think I'll stick to saving lives," I said. He laughed, then handed me a folded piece of paper. "Open it later." I waited until I got home. Inside was a handwritten note from the new HOA board. It said simply, "Thank you for reminding us that accountability is not optional." Below it were a dozen signatures. In the months that followed, the neighborhood shifted in quiet but significant ways. The board introduced a rotating leadership model where no one could serve more than a year without re-election. All expenditures required triple authorization. And perhaps most importantly, the phrase HOA emergency access became a banned phrase in the bylaws. The lockbox was removed entirely. The house Zelda once lived in was purchased by a single dad and his teenage daughter. They painted the shutters red and hosted a barbecue the first weekend they moved in. I brought over a tray of lemon bars and a small card welcoming them to the neighborhood. They didn't know what had come before them. They didn't need to. The story had ended where it should, with justice served, the community stronger, and one less tyrant wearing the mask of civic duty. And me? I finally bought the blackout curtains I'd been putting off for 2 years and started sleeping through the day without worrying who might be sneaking into my home. No more notes. No more lemonade diplomacy. Just peace, earned the hard way.